a quote from Thanissaro, "Embracing the hurt and confusion, we learn to trust that there is something greater, something mysterious and full of grace." And so whatever we do tonight, we really want to bow together that there are many, many different responses to the events of our world, of our week. And so really want to be including it all in our hearts and minds and discussions. I want to say a couple words, and then I will introduce our illustrious panel. You've heard us speak many times about the three jewels that are at the heart of Buddhism. The Buddha, the awakened mind, freedom, freedom from suffering. You know, it's why we're all here. It's why we've all started on this path. It's why we're all here tonight. Yeah? That longing for freedom from suffering. And we can honor that that is the Buddha in our own being, longing for itself. So if you just sort of tune in, take a moment and tune in to your own wish for goodness, for gladness of heart, for freedom. That is just, at its deepest level, your own Buddha, awakened heart, longing, if you will, for itself, longing to be free of whatever the obscurations are that cloud us over. What we're stuck with is relationship that is often kind of imperfect. Relationship with ourselves and our own being, relationships with other people, relationships with our world. And so that's where our practice is, at the collision really of this longing, this kind of seed of awakening and the imperfect. Kabir says, the guest is inside you and also inside me. You know the sprout is hidden inside the seed. And he goes on to say, we are all struggling. None of us has gone far. Or my favorite from Ajahn Amaro says he saw a bumper sticker that said, be kind, all of us are idiots. You know, so, you know, we're invited to be kind to ourselves, to others. So it's a collision of the imperfect and the other with this seed of awakening that is right where our practice is. Philip Moffat speaks of these difficult moments as opportunity for the most relevant, sophisticated, inspiring, and useful inquiry you could conduct in your life. So here we are. How cool is that? Here we are. So the Buddha, the Dharma is all of the teachings. It's all of the teachings that you read and you study and you listen to week after week. The Dharma, the teachings. And the sangha. The sangha of the Buddha and all the lineage of teachers that have come before us. The sangha of our teachers. I just think it's so much fun to see them all sitting here. Isn't this cool? I did a little calculation this morning. And just my own kind of rough estimate, conservative rough estimate, is what you are seeing is 500 years of practice. Not bad, huh?
Some of us having practiced a whole lot longer.
It's true. Untold hours for all of us as teachers of personal retreats, refuge, often psychotherapy, you know, places where we get stuck in our own lives, in our own PTSD, and our own traumas, in our own relationship. in the difficulties with our children, in our difficulties with our substance abuse. You know, we're all human. None of us has gone far, and yet there is practice. Yay. Mm. And all of these teachers, you know, they're like different threads of Buddhism. We've come to do that a little bit more often lately than we used to, where there are just different ways of approaching Buddhism, some of which disagree with each other. And again, how cool is that? That we get to kind of really look at different perspectives and different ways of working. And you, part of the sangha, all of us together on this journey. Here we all are. So last week I invited you to offer questions, and we ended up with 48 questions, and roughly organized into about 10 categories. Obviously, we can't do all that tonight. But we also wanted to check in again with you all, because lots has happened this week. And some of our hearts are puzzled or heavy or confused or struggling. And so we wanted to know just what comes up for you. What are you hoping the Dharma has to offer you tonight? So before we talk about the actual questions, what do you wonder about? How's life? Huh? How's life this week? Anybody? That's why we asked you to do it in writing, because it's easier sometimes to do it in writing. But anybody? Yeah, so.
Very simply, fear.
Okay.
Fear for others.
Fear what?
Fear for others, and ultimately fear for our country.
Okay. So I'm going to ask for a few of these thoughts, and then we're going to ask if any of the teachers have a response to that. Okay. Another Sue. Sue's are asking questions.
I think I'm wondering how to be in this time of our lives right now, how to be, just how to be. Because it feels like a big change has occurred, and how do I do my life now?
Okay. So are you wondering, Susan, about like uncertainty or change?
I guess I feel that these times require a change,
Uh-huh.
and a kind of regrouping and deciding now how to be given the circumstances.
Okay.
Is that
Okay. Good. Let's take one more from here, and then somebody online. Martin?
Oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Well, go ahead, Martin.
Well, I mean, just to understand.
Here, hold it right up to you.
Oh,
Here, it's on, but just hold it like right there. There we go.
okay.
So
How's
the
that?
Zoom people can hear you.
To understand how so many can accept the vulgarity, I guess is kind of the essence. Just how could that be okay?
Okay. How to be okay with that. And is there anybody online who wants to ask the teachers a question? You got a lot of little black spot boxes. Chris, yeah.
Yeah, how to listen deeply with an open heart when there is such strong division and disagreement, even about reality. I struggle deeply.
Okay, thank you. Now, with those 4 questions, we probably could spend the rest of the evening. So I'm going to ask the teachers, can any of you pick up any responses to any of those questions? Matt?
Thank you for the questions. And I'm just going to speak very briefly around fear. One of my teachers described it this way: fear is the fear of fear. Knowing that that can sound a little dismissive. Oh, it's just that easy. It's not. I feel a lot of fear as well. And then around the question from Chris around challenging what is true. What's helped me recently is to try to remember that the root delusion is that of confusion or misunderstanding how things really are, sometimes called ignorance. And if I'm able to, from my heart, notice that people who believe things very different from what I believe in are suffering from a misknowing, a confusion of how things really are, that can help me to soften a little bit into some compassion.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any of the rest of you have something to offer there about any of that? Just share the microphone. I'm sure you do. Please. Yes, you all do.
Just to piggyback on what you said, Matt, I think one of the,
Teresa having a little trouble hearing you.
yes, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I think one of the challenges for me personally is to look deeply at view, at the changes that are happening, and like Matt's referenced, softening the heart to understand what else is true and to extend kindness everywhere. You've heard me say before, maybe a quote from a poem, be kind to everyone. You do not know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone.
Who else? Or how does it land for you all? Who wants to follow up here? With maybe challenging something somebody said or inquiring further? Or do you want to direct a question to somebody in particular?
I was thinking about the question of fear of what's coming because of the election, let's say. And I realized I'd been carrying around this kind of dread with me for all week, and it sort of came out in meditation. But thinking about this great article I read in Tricycle Magazine about how fear is always in the future. So we're always fearing that something's bad's going to happen. Usually we fear it a lot more than it ever happens. And so I kind of helps me step back a little bit. Okay, I'm fearing something that I'm projecting is going to happen, but maybe it isn't. And even this article said, even when bad things do happen, they're always different than we've projected them to be. And so being open allows you to react more nimbly to the situation and less stuck in it and less, grinding down by the fear before it even happens or if it ever happens.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody there? Share the microphone. Hello. Yeah, sure.
I have a comment about fear. I guess I always thought of it as a survival instinct, that you should pay attention to it because it's your instincts and your senses. And I keep reading about people who in Germany who didn't want to see what was happening there and denied it. So that's the basis of what I'm talking about. And frankly, I don't get fear is afraid of fear. Fear is fear of fear. I'm going to have to think about that. But thank you.
Thanks. I had read Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Fear, before the election, but continue to recognize fear. And to add, and I'm really nearsighted. So is it Chris who had asked about the reality? So in the book, he's also describing how when we're looking at reality, and I'd read this before the election, where he's describing the unity of all things. The reality is that we are all one, the interconnectedness, and that is the reality. And I relate to, and I'm asking this as a question to, like, that is reality. And then the reality that I hear Chris is also speaking to is like, there's suffering in our human experience and reality. And then the division of what we perceive as reality, which it's not trivial to view the reality and the impact in our dimensionality and how it impacts other humans. And the fear, would you be able to offer some guidance of just to acknowledge the fear as it arises, when it's present, to keep our hearts open, or and I ask this because some people have dismissed the election sometimes, or said that the outcome doesn't matter as much because the reality is we're all one.
Thank you.
I'd like to speak to the fear a little too. And I think we all have our own reactions, and I just want to speak perhaps from my own because that's what I know. But when I sit with my reactions to this world this week, fear does arise. I realize it's sitting there, and you mentioned fear for others, which is the experience I'm having. I'm imagining different groups, different communities who will be hurt, and I fear for them. And fear creates this reaction in our bodies, like, I've got to do something, right? And I think that is what is creating a lot of difficulty for me, is this sense of I've got to respond. And so I'm sitting with that sense that I want to be true to myself. I find a way in which I can do something to respond. I have been really moved by a Rumi quote this week. It's, "Be a lamp or a lifeboat or a ladder. Help someone's soul heal. Walk out of your house like a shepherd." And that's where I find myself putting my energy and looking and thinking about the way in which I can help someone's, my own, and someone's difficulty, the fear that they face ahead of them. And that feels like the right space to occupy, so I can be true to myself, because I'm really not wanting to go to anger. I'm really not wanting to become a person who's living in anger for years. I want to be true to myself.
Thank you.
So I'd like to speak to the point that you mentioned, that we are all one, essentially. And I think that is part of what these circumstances that we're in can help us recognize. Thich Nhat Hanh's little statement, no mud, no lotus. Now, recognizing everybody's mud, person's mud is another person's maybe paradise. But right now we're talking about our conditions here, which is pretty heavy for all of us. So the question that comes up for me, how can we use this to really go deeper into our own practice? And Susan, you asked the question about how to be. And that's, I think, what the challenge is. Can we go deeper into what we really find out what we are? Find that place where we are all one. And there's a great image about the sun and clouds. The sun being that which we, at our deepest level, truly are. Can we touch that? Every one of us. The truth of being. And recognizing at the same time, okay, we have lots of clouds that cover us at times. That's okay. We work with them. But I think that the difficulties that we're facing right now can help us, prod us. I think we need to go deeper. I think it's like I don't want to just say challenge, that's too antiseptic a word, but it's something that can pull us on into really, what am I? And that answers the question once we begin touching into, that's how to be. Let it shine.
Thank you.
When we learn Tonglen practice, one of the instructions is to hold hands. Imagine you're holding hands with other people that have the same situation or the same condition or the same diagnosis or the same whatever that, and if you imagine that you're holding hands with other people with this same thing in a large circle, you realize, like having a difficult parent or having a difficult sister or a difficult child or whatever, that you're all in the same boat, that you're not in this together. And when I think of the whole world and the difficulties that most countries and most people in most countries have been facing for many years, somehow it's very helpful that, you know, we're learning, we're in a new stage now and learning.
Beautiful.
We can do it.
We can do it.
So last week, about half of the population of this country didn't get what they wanted. About half got what they wanted. You know, the tangle of views from both sides, earnestly thinking that a particular perspective is the correct perspective. So as practitioners and humans, we have all kinds of reactions. And what our practice implores us to do is to turn toward that experience as fully as we can, and to bring as much compassion to ourselves and what's happening within us, as much equanimity as we can muster. And suffering happens when we get something we don't want and when we don't get what we do want. And whether it's grieving a loved one that's in the process of dying or has died, or financial failure or whatever. can we turn toward it with as much equanimity, mindfulness, and compassion as we can muster at the time? And sometimes it's too hard to turn toward it, and we have to turn away and distract ourselves, and that's part of the whole process. And then there are those moments when things can actually quiet, and they can quiet from that process at times. And paying attention to that fear or that anger, feeling it in the body, bringing that sense of love to ourselves. And when there are quiet moments, there is the possibility of feeling that deep connectedness that we have to everything, not just people, but everything. And those are the moments that have been articulated throughout time. But this is a situation where it's not what many of us would have desired. There are strong currents, as the Buddha said, of greed, hatred, and delusion that are part of our survival mechanisms that run rampant. And so we take care of each other, we take care of ourselves, recognize that it's impossible to control external events. And in some sense, we're monkeys on a rock. We're flying through space. We're doing the best we can. Everyone is, with what they have available. And in times like this, being together, holding each other, doing what we can is the appropriate response.
Thank you.
So being specific for me helps me to then what to do. I always say, okay, so what do I do, right? I've had these moments of the clarity, usually at 3:30 in the morning after an hour or two of not feeling very clear. And then the moment will arise in a reminder of what I already know. So we've spoken of Thich Nhat Hanh. I think he's been a guidepost for me as well, because he went through so much for so long. He couldn't go to his country for 40 years. Some of us are new to this and some of us not. Some of us in this country have endured. They wake up every morning already in fear. And so here we are. So Thich Nhat Hanh said, pause, sit, walk. That was always his suggestion. Pause, sit, walk, and then take action. And he did take action. He was out on the boats trying to save the boat people. And I believe this too. Do what you can with what you have in the time that you're given in the place where you are, and that is enough. So pause,
Sit, walk.
sit, walk. One other thing too that occurred to me is I was trying to find the answer outside myself. I wanted something to fix it. I wanted things to be better. It's like Pat said, that's not what I wanted, what happened. And then I realized it's already here. I already have the answer within me. The love is already here. The security is already here. I don't need to find it somewhere else. I don't need someone else to fix it for me. I've got to take care of that. I've got to nurture it, let it grow. And then I can go offer it.
Thank you. How about more from You all, comments, reactions to what the teachers have said, further questions, clarifications. Maybe somebody online, you had something?
I'm not sure. I'm going to try this. I feel that there's a relationship between anger and fear. And thank you. There's a relationship between anger and fear. I was not stunned, but I couldn't quite live very well for a few days after the election. And I was grieving. I'm still grieving. I'm also grieving for our souls, for ourselves here, but we are privileged. There'll be people who'll be, I believe, very much harmed. I talked with a friend today whose friends are migrants, immigrants, and I don't know what will happen to them. And that does make me angry. And yet it's what do I do with that? I'm not ready to do anything right now. I'm kind of exhausted, but I will be, and it will be in love, and it will be hopefully in protection. But I believe we need to realize how privileged we are here tonight to be able to talk openly and freely.
Thank you. Anybody?
In addition to what everyone has said, which I experience most of the same, I am realizing that I'm really hungry for a more comprehensive understanding of what's happening. So not the Democrats or the Republicans or the Latinos or the Blacks or the women, but on a soul level, what is actually occurring, or on a spiritual level. And that kind of understanding helps me place myself. It's maybe less random and maybe also gives it some more meaning. And so I'm really throwing myself into this, and I'm curious from teachers or others, if you were to explain or paint the picture of what is happening to the collective soul on earth for all of us, what would you say? I've been reading about initiation and gestation and entering into a time of darkness, which is, in the individual hero's journey, right? There's always the descent and the loss of ego and the opening of consciousness. And on a collective level, how are people holding this?
I think you just answered your own question, but okay. Anybody else want to respond?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what Bev just said kind of follows what I said, kind of ties in with what Bev said. Where is it? Thank you. Where is it? And I'm not going to say I have the view of where we are, the big view, but I have a view and I will express it. And my sense is about the overall. I think that I think the overall issue for us as a human race is climate change. I think that the escalation of climate change, which is going to happen from everything we've read and seen, can push us as human beings to go deeper. It may. And I'm just talking about opening of consciousness. It is so possible that the devastating effects of climate chaos will push us even again, the no mud, no lotus, meant in And in a really profound way, and I'm sure Thich Nhat Hanh meant it in a profound way, but I can see that as the dynamic of what may happen for human consciousness as we begin to open to, wait a minute, what is this all about when we're really down on our knees as human beings? I'm not saying everybody, but I think or can only hope that there'll be a significant element amongst the human beings alive that will do that. It will really go, and that's just what the Buddha has been asking us anyway, just what every great spiritual tradition and leader asks. Really get down there. Live it, see it. That's finally the spiritual issue. And I could foresee possibly this is going to lead us in this direction, and maybe faster than we would have wished. I suspect climate issue, well, okay, one political issue statement. I think climate issues are going to be will become quicker as a result of this administration, because from everything we hear, they don't care much or won't care much about climate, and which could quicken this whole dynamic.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Bev, for mentioning or alluding to what seems to be the case collectively for our culture experiencing moral injury and losing our compass. And for me, as someone who practices in the Himalayan traditions, the Kala Chakra Tantra has some wise teachings for how do I deal with this. And Kala Chakra means cycles of time. And in that text, there are analogies made between cycles within the body, on a daily basis, a yearly basis, on a cosmic level. And that helps me to see the wider view and how, we may be in a period of decline, but that's going to come back up as you mentioned. And just to go briefly back to my cryptic fear is the fear of fear, because I'm afraid that maybe that sounded a little Flip, sorry, Flip, to use your name in vain. I think to me what that is speaking to that relates to this topic of maybe being in a cycle of decline is there is that fear that you were describing, Sue, that is evolutionarily built into us. It's a call to action. We've got to be on guard. We've got to get ready to do something. And that's, in my understanding, the third of the fears, and fear is the fear of fear, that we can hold that urgency and that need to have a call, to action, to do what needs to be done. And then there's the second arrow that the Buddha spoke of where we can maybe get into a pattern of reifying fear so that it is very solid and seems overwhelming and impenetrable and unmanageable. And for me, if I'm able to name it, okay, that's fear, and fear, you are allowed to be here, rather than pressing away, I shouldn't be scared, I shouldn't be feeling fear. Then if I'm able to loosen the resistance to fear, then I'm preventing that second arrow of adding more suffering on top of the, I'll call it legitimate fear. And so that's to me what, and I just wanted to clarify that because I didn't want to be advocating spiritual bypassing in any way. And so.
I'm still quite in the middle of the muck of it all. And I wanted to say that, as Pat mentioned, 50% of us got what we wanted and 50% of us didn't, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
I have been quite shaken down to my marrow by this election, and it has invited me to become very still, to pause, 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 and pause some more, and sit and reflect on fear, for sure, and come to understand in a way that I didn't previously how much I don't like fear. That's not exactly what the gist of it, but the gist of it is we hate fear. Fear is so uncomfortable. And it has tenderized me tremendously to the fears that the other 50% has been living with for quite some time. That the other 50% went to the ballot box to register their needs, wants, desires. Of course, I'm still right. But there is that sort of moral place that we very easily climb to and claim, right? We all think it should be, we don't know that we all think anything. None of us wants to be afraid, though. That softens me tremendously. It makes me feel all mushy and lovey and all that stuff for me, as well as for the people who disagree with me.
Thank you. Well, it's 8:33. We obviously could go on for a very long time. I think we need to honor our commitment to stop at 8:30. I'm going to propose that many, if not all, of these beloved teachers will be happy to hang out a little bit. And maybe what we can do is to collect some resources. Somebody, Bev, you asked for resources, and maybe we can collect some resources and send those around in terms of what is helpful. If any of you want to add to those resources, things that you found that are really useful in helping your practice, please send them. You can send them to Brianna, send them to me, and we'll collect them and get them back out to you. This is obviously way too short. One thing that I really want to bow to, however, that we can hear in all of the responses is our teachers practicing with it. Practicing with it. And what we can bow to all of your questions and comments is you, us, we, together. Practicing with it. We help each other, you know. So we help each other. We'll continue. We carry on. Yeah. We carry on. We'll continue somehow or other. We're not sure how. And that's sort of, I mean, we'll continue this discussion. We'll figure out what to do with all those questions. Many of them have been raised tonight. So we'll carry on. Any of you want to say any final words? I know, Matt, you have an offering of merit for us. Anybody want to say anything in closing? I just got to make a little speech. Any of you want to make a little speech? Very good. Okay, thank you all. Thank you. Matt, yeah.
Okay, shall we dedicate the merit, the positive potential and force of our practice together? Refuge does not arise in a particular place, but in the space within the goodness of our hearts. When this space is imbued with wisdom, respect, and love, we call it sangha. We hope that the pain of suffering, trauma, and feeling apart actually leads us back toward the heart, and that we might understand compassion, wisdom, and change ever more deeply. As we've learned from practice, great pain does not erase goodness, but in fact informs it. May we make the best use of our practice and whatever freedom arises from our efforts here tonight. May this be a cause and condition for less suffering and more safety in our world.
Amen. And Mary Louise. You?
Hey, I'm going to chant us out or sing us out. For those of you who know the loving kindness chant, we'll just sing it one time through, and please join in. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be, may you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. May they be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. May they be happy. And finally, may we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be happy.